At the exact moment Yukari first erected the Great Hakurei Barrier surrounding Gensokyo, a shrill, piercing scream reverberated throughout the entire structure, frightening everyone within. No one knew where or why it was made, but from then on, it would return to frighten all of Gensokyo once again, every few years. However, reports of wanderers approaching the walls and coming back apathetic, dejected, and utterly dreamless pile higher every year, getting to the point that Yukari, with the help of Doremy, ruler of the dream world, can no longer pretend someone isn't trapped within Gensokyo's walls. This was the original description of the fan game, according to both mine and Doro the Flaundraying Fire Fairies, Doro for simplicity, recollection. There is no confirmed creator, no download page, and no paper trail of any kind. The following conversation has been formatted to fit the layout of this site, but the text itself has not been changed. So it had an actual plot? That's a lot of effort for a bullet hell Toho game. Yeah, man! Like cutscenes and voice acting. It would have been cool if the story itself wasn't so, I don't know, fucked, I guess? Fucked? I'm sorry, could you elaborate on that a bit? Like, what was actually in the game for you? Well, like I said, it started out explaining the plot with cutscenes, showing Yukari creating the barrier, and then showing this little horned creature getting caught in the middle of it and screaming, scaring everyone. And then it shows the reports of people being depressed, basically, after going near the wall. And then Yukari brings Doremy, annoyed that the screaming is starting up again, and forcing Doremy to come out of the dream world to help find the little horned lady we saw with her dream journal. Do we find out who the horned lady is? Yes, I'm getting to that right now, actually. Because after Doremy, senses the aura of people's dreams or something, she picks up on a spot that's rapidly moving around inside the barrier, like a ping pong ball. And so Yukari uses her powers to open a hole in the barrier to find the horned lady. Pretty much. Here's a rough picture of what she looked like. Kyofu Abusoba? Huh. Very feral for a fan character. Right? Also, surprise, she's another Baku. A Dream Eater just like Doremy, except Kyofu's been trapped for 500 years, since she was there when the barrier was made, and was most likely on the edge of starving to death constantly, since hardly anyone is strong enough to make it to the border anymore. Thank you, cutscenes, for explaining all that by that. Also, Kyofu's terrified of mostly Yukari because of what she could do to her. But Yukari and Doremy don't realize that, so when Kyofu runs away, they just chase after her to try to talk. Which is when the real game starts. And it's also when the suffering starts, right? Again, it wasn't hard, just there was a 5-minute pause before Doro started talking again. So, we get to the battle, and the background is fucking crazy. Like, there was no epilepsy warning, and I'm not epileptic either. But it still kinda hurt my eyes with how intense it was. So, it was a bunch of colors flashing rapidly? No, it was detailed. Like, photographs of real places. Places that were nightmarish would be a good way to put it. Like, dimly lit hallways, people staring at you late at night through your windows, abandoned houses, burned houses, teeth, rotting teeth. Ugh. I think one of the worst ones was a guy pulling a vein out of his arm or something. Ugh. But thankfully a huge blur was covering the screen, so it made it semi-bearable. But yeah, just think of the worst things you could do to someone, and that was what was flashing in the background. Huh. What about the fight? So, despite what the story led me to believe, Doremy was the only playable character, unfortunately. So I just bit the disappointment bullet and started a new game. But before the battle began, Doremy tried to tell Kyofu that she, and I quote, just wanted to be friends. But Kyofu just growled at Doremy to leave her alone, and so she attacked, firing these red spike bullets at me that was fairly easy to dodge. Thankfully, Doremy's bullets were pretty strong, especially since it was on normal. So the phase went by pretty quickly. The next phase started with Kyofu scolding Doremy, telling her to stop hurting me. Doremy in confusion told her that she was just trying to battle, only for her to realize, wait, do you even have any spell cards, Kyofu? But Kyofu just screamed at her that she doesn't care and won't fall for her tricks, and to get out of what's left of her life. So she doesn't know what a Danmakufu battle is. But then, how is she attacking if she doesn't know how to play? That's cause Kyofu isn't playing along, if that makes sense. And I'll get to how she's attacking in a bit. Because the next phase is a sub-phase where a horse comes out. A nightmare. Oh, I get it. Very clever. Yeah, pretty obvious, but it's not an exaggeration of what it is, because what happens next, like everything else, so thus is so vivid. I can tell you almost every detail. Another long pause stalled the description. So the nightmare opened its mouth, and from it, 2 more horse mouths came out, splitting the original mouth apart as more mouths came out of more mouths until a whole third of the screen was taken up by horse teeth, like some horse hydra. As horrendous, distorted horse screaming and crying pierced my ears as it began spinning around the screen to try and eat me. Naturally, I had to pause for a second just to absorb what I was witnessing. Like, what the fuck is that? Why is that? And that I had to dodge that. Were you able to? No, it would grab me and throw me around the battlefield like a rag doll with its grip. And the only way to defeat it was to shoot at the heads until I got to the base of the horse's real mouth. And if I took too long, it would get so large that it would just eat me whole. It was annoying too, because it's not like I could rotate my aim around. I had to shoot straight up. So yeah, I died a lot there before I figured that out and moved on to the next phase. Was it any better? Compared to before, yeah, definitely easier. I got back to fighting Kyofu and her screaming at poor Doremy, who tried to offer her some of her spell cards, or even just to teach Kyofu the dueling system proper. But Kyofu just started chucking huge red, pulsating spike poles at me that could box me in if I wasn't careful. Which got even worse when, without warning, Kyofu reached out to the borders of the battlefield box and pulled them inwards, creating a sort of hourglass shape out of the battlefield. Wait, so she changed the shape of the battlefield? How is that even possible? I don't know, man, but it caught me by surprise and I got hit. And when I did, Doremy expressed pain, which shocked her since, you know, these duels aren't supposed to hurt. But Kyofu just laughed, saying,
I got you! Got you! I'm gonna get you!
Kyofu then squeezed the bottom and top halves of the inwards, pulling Doremy right up to Kyofu's character on the battlefield, with Kyofu's portrait staring directly at the screen as the battlefield turned pitch black, before telling Doremy that, "You're not getting into my head. I'm going straight through yours." Needless to say, Doremy was very unsettled by what Kyofu meant by that. But before she could call out for Yukari to help her, Kyofu blasted the boundary walls back into place and sent a giant red spear flying into the middle of the screen, where it began slowly spinning as featureless people crying, all curled into fetal positions, spun toward me, trying to swipe at me with their hands and feet before curling back into place. I'm guessing those were supposed to be fairies? Probably. Anyways, as that phase ended, Kyofu cried out in anger, yelling that everyone was useless! And that it seems like I need to strike a bit deeper. Show me what you're afraid of! The battlefield screen then changed to a shot of Doremy's every extremity being impaled by red spikes, and Kyofu driving a giant red spear of her own straight through Doremy's skull. Surprisingly, this angered Kyofu, crying that she already knew that. 3 large red claws manifested on either side of Kyofu's character model, dashing at Doremy, trying to gore her as I desperately began dodging her. So, to state the obvious, Kyofu has been trying to kill Doremy this whole time? I don't see why else she could be doing all of this, so yeah, definitely. But as Kyofu kept attacking, swiping and slashing and bashing her horns against the borders violently, she began to gradually slow down to a crawl. Like her character was crawling across the screen on all fours. When, suddenly, the screen changed to a cutscene of Kyofu in pure darkness, crawling towards the camera, and into a spotlight revealing her arms and face. Do you remember what I said about how Kyofu can attack without spell cards? I've been wondering that the whole time, Doro. Yeah, well, turns out she's been using her body to create her attacks. Her blood, her skin, muscle, all of her flesh was a resource to use against you. And it was clear to see with her practically skeletal forearms and fingers and neck and parts of her cheeks missing, showing her hole-filled mouth as she stood up with very smooth animation as blood trickled down her exposed muscles and her fingertips. She raised her hands to her face, looking down at her hands, as pained tears trickled down her face as she whispered, "This isn't enough, is it?" Now, get ready for this next part, because I swear to God in heaven above, this is exactly what I saw immediately afterward, alright? Yeah, of course. I made it this far, might as well. Okay, so Kyofu clenches her fists and snarled directly at the screen. Her body's flesh peeling back down to the bone as blood began pooling up through her kimono to her now completely skeletal hands. Her hair falling off her scalp as her face deteriorated to pure bone. Steam coming off her body as she began shaking violently as blood trickled out of her mouth and down what was left of her arms, until her raw mouth fell open to let out a gargling, bellowing banshee screech as her liquefying organs began spewing out of her throat and gathering around her blood-pooling hands. When, without warning, the blood shot out at the screen as all her flesh was violently expelled from her body in one last Hail Mary to kill me. Did it, work? It's a 50-50 of where you were in the fight with Kyofu when she slowed down, and if you were right in front of her, you died immediately. But if you were behind her, you had like half a second to react before she spun around to target you and impale you. And if by an immeasurable amount of luck you manage to dodge the final attack, then you get to watch an animation of her frozen mid-scream skeleton collapsing and shattering into dust and then you'd get the score screen like nothing weird happened at all. And you'd be booted right back to the menu. Wait, that's it? The end? What about, like, a good ending? You know, like if you got a perfect run, you'd get a different result. Hell if I know, but I guess it's too late to find out now. But anyways, you get what I meant by this whole thing being fucked now, right? Yeah, I can see that now. If not at any point before the ending, which I have to say, I'm kind of glad I didn't get around to playing this at the time. Would have screwed me up for life if this is what it was like. For sure. Ugh. Thank God for Windows updates screwing with my files or something, cause then I'd have no excuse to go and find this game. So, thanks for that, I guess. I just have to wonder why. So much effort only to just chuck all of it away, and for what? No, this guy went straight to the Toho-centric fan game site specifically to upload this. This was made to be seen, there's no other way. So, why get rid of it? You know, maybe it was simply a bad look, the whole thing, or maybe he just thought it wasn't good enough. Nah, I bet he's just a sicko who wants to see women get skewered or something. Whatever. I bet you pulled all of this out your ass if that were the case. Nah, too much effort. Way too much. But, seriously, this was way too crazy to just disappear. What the hell happened? I mean, it had to be something. Does it have to be? And that was Doremy and the Dream Eater, written by DJ Sprouts. Review time. Okay, so before I actually get into this review, I want to point out that this story actually came out of a challenge I proposed to him. See, a lot of Toho stories that I've read tend to be either very cliched or needlessly violent for no good reason. And the best one, I'm putting that in quotes, the best Toho story before this one came in that I read was pretty cheesy for its time, and even had a reference to another creepypasta, which was But here, it's actually new and presented in a new way, which I greatly appreciate. For starters, it has a concept that I haven't seen be done in a while. How, instead of this game being played by the protagonist, and him summarizing what he saw throughout the entire story, it's a conversation between two forum members, and one of them giving the other information about what they saw. It also leaves a bit of an enigma by the end of the story, like the whole good ending portion of the game. Is there even a good ending? If there's a good ending, would Kyofu have lived? Would she have met the other characters? Would she have improved overall as a person? We may never know. And I really like that element of mystery added. The whole proof of concept for this horror bullet hell fan game makes me really want to play it and see what it would have looked like, even if it isn't real. Toho fan games don't just range from bullet hell, Japanese folklore-styled stuff. It also delves into horror, like this one does, and platforming, and sometimes those little, like, puzzle games that you'd find on your phone. I don't mind the slight punctuation errors here and there, as this is meant to be a forum thread, and not everyone talks with perfect grammar. And plus, it was coherent enough to understand, so I won't be taking points off for that. However, there are two things that I will be removing points for. The first one being, while I don't consider this a flaw, but since this story is meant to sum up what happened in the game when the protagonist didn't get the chance to play it, it really makes me wonder what Kyofu's personality in full was like. We have established that Kyofu as a character is basically a complete mental wreck, but, like, is she a static character? Is she dynamic? Does she switch moods throughout battle, or is she angry the entire time? Is she more mad than she is scared of you? The actual official Toho characters that are in this game are put forth and showcased like how they are in the games. And that's pretty cool. They're lore accurate. I just really wish we got more clarity on what kind of person Kyofu is alongside that. And the second one I kind of consider a flaw because in the end, after the game was done, the protagonists kind of spoke awkwardly to each other. Like, they weren't annoying or condescending at all, but, like, both in the context of prose and their connotation, it was kind of weird. Like, the game is supposedly really scary, with scary imagery and scary content. If that's the case, then how does this character know that it was not made for horror? Well, let's play ball and say that this creation was made for the developer to have some sort of self-pleasure to whatever these people were seeing. If it was meant for that, then why would they make it public for other people to play? And if it's taken down by either the admins of this website or the developer himself, then there would clearly be a reason for why this was taken down. Discluding the very obvious one, which is the imagery. To answer the protagonist's question, which is, does it have to have a reason? I mean, yeah. Especially if you put this much effort into a project. It can't just be taken down without purpose. Unless the administration has really weird motives, but I digress. For me, I will give this one an 8 out of 10. Wasn't too awkward for the most part. It was pretty solid story on its own. Not bad. Not bad for a Toho Pasta DJ. Would love to see what else you come up with. Everything I've read from you so far actually stood out. Especially your Loud House stuff, so keep it up, man. With that being said, this is simply my personal opinion, and you know what I always say. We all have our opinions regarding these pastas. What did you think of the pasta? What would you have done to improve upon it if you were the writer? And with that being said, I already said that. I'll see you all in the next narration. I love you all. Bless. Happy Valentine's Day.
Jeez, what's the matter? You can't sleep? Good. Stay tuned, pal. You're watching Lafawndapasta.